Coming up on Network Africa. Uganda landslides kill at least 15 amid heavy rainfall. Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta finally speaks to President-elect William Ruto. Plus, International Committee of the Red Cross warns that almost 1 million people have fled their homes in Somalia and Kenya looking for food and water. Hello and welcome to the program today. I'm Teniola Uyitayo. We begin in East Africa, where landslides triggered by heavy rainfall have killed at least 15 people, mostly women and children, in Kasese, western Uganda. Some homes were also washed away by floodwaters that tore through the area located on the foothills of the Rwenzori Mountains. A spokesperson for the Uganda Red Cross says 6 people were injured in the landslides in Rukoki following torrential rains. The region is prone to landslides and saw 3 people killed last week in Budibugoyo district. The rainy season, which normally starts in August, has this year resulted in devastation in parts of the country. Several parts of East Africa have experienced severe weather this year, from long droughts to destructive rains and flooding. The VOA's Alima Athumani joins us now on the program for more. Alima, thank you so much for joining us on the program. Just speak to us about the situation on ground now regarding search and rescue efforts so far.
So let's start with what happened early this morning at 4 a.m. The Uganda Red Cross lady that you mentioned, Irene Nakasita, sent out a message saying they got an alert at exactly 4 a.m. talking about a landslide. And indeed, when their teams went to the ground, they realized. So what you need to know is that Kasese, as I said, is on the foothills of Mountain Rwenzori. And then the area is also quite very hilly, very mountainous. And that because of also degrading of the forest, there's been so many trees that have been cut down. So there's really not enough protection for people, especially those who are living on the mountain slopes. Currently, the Red Cross is really trying. As you mentioned, 15 people have been killed. No one knows how many more people have been buried in their own houses. Many of these houses are built out of mud and water. So you can imagine among the 15, many of them are women and children, but also I think there's a whole family that was buried alive in this mud. So especially the Red Cross is really trying at the moment to try and see if they can rescue. But remember, this is not a place where you can take in, graders to try and sort out the mud and get people out. So everything that is being done now is being done manually, by hand, by hose. So it's just the community and a few members of the authorities who are coming in to help those who are stuck in this horrible situation.
It is really a tragic situation. And we know some homes, like you mentioned, have been washed away and sadly people left homeless. How are authorities supporting the now displaced?
In these cases, and it's unfortunate that the rains have come now, just a week, today is Wednesday, just 3 days into the start of the school week. And many cases, most times when cases like this happen, you find that most of those who've been displaced will always be put up, will be asked to move into empty schools, empty churches. But obviously schools always take the loss because, there's some facility like sanitation, maybe some water, which you cannot easily find, maybe, at most of these village churches. So this means many people will now have to seek support either from, there are some relatives or just friends or just villagers who still have their houses standing. That is the only option that they're going to have right now for them to be able to get some shelter for the night or for the coming days until they can actually find where to go to.
And Alima, what's the situation like in the capital? Are residents also experiencing heavy rainfall there as well?
Well, I will tell you that just about 2 hours back, I was in the city center and it started raining. The rains are really heavy. They come with windstorms and it's pushing things down. Billboards are falling down. these makeshift shelters are falling down. There's so much that is coming down. There's flooding everywhere. And, the flooding with our city that we call the pothole city, there'll be mud in the middle of the road. There's going to be rubbish and plastic littered all over the road that, were previously probably pushed into these trenches along the highways and all of that. So there's a lot of rain. And of course, the rain forecast or the weather forecast is that we need to brace ourselves for more heavy rains throughout this month. Whether that will be the case or not, that obviously when it rains, it really pours.
All right, Anima, we do hope you stay safe. Thank you so much for the update.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome.
And to politics now, Kenya's newly elected president, William Ruto, says he has had a phone conversation with outgoing President Uhuru Kenyatta about the transition. Mr. Ruto says they spoke about the just concluded election and the democratic transition. Mr. Kenyatta, who backed Mr. Ruto's rival, Raila Odinga, for the presidency, had not spoken to the newly elected president since he was declared the winner of the August 9th general election. In a media briefing after the Supreme Court confirmed him as the winner, the president-elect said that they had not spoken for months. On the same day, President Kenyatta sent out a statement giving an assurance that there would be a smooth transition without mentioning Mr. Ruto or congratulating him for the win. However, some Kenyans online are criticizing Mr. Kenyatta for being petty about the matter. In the meantime, a newly elected Kenyan governor has won praise for harsh office rules after turning away top officials from a meeting for arriving minutes later than him. Governor George Natembeya of Trans Nzoia County in Western Kenya ordered doors to be closed for anyone arriving past 9 a.m., the time set for the meeting. The meeting with County Executive Committee members, equivalent of cabinet ministers, was meant to discuss the country's development plan for the next 5 years. The governor has gained a reputation for his strictness in his former role as a government administrator. And over in Burundi, the parliament has voted unanimously to accept Gervais Ndikubuka as prime minister following nomination by the president. All 113 MPs attending the morning session voted in favor of the president's proposal to dismiss the current prime minister, Alian Bunyoni. No reasons were given for the dismissal during the half-an-hour session. The president recently claimed there was a plot against him by some powerful people, but said he would defeat them. The newly voted Prime Minister is also the current Minister of Interior and Security, is a former rebel commander, police commissioner, and army general. The president is, however, expected to decree Mr. Ndikubuka as the new Prime Minister. The International Committee of the Red Cross warns that almost 1 million people have fled their homes in Somalia and Kenya looking for food and water. It comes as a drought worsens and global food prices surge, putting millions of people at risk of hunger. The latest outlook confirms the fears of aid agencies, which have been warning for months about the worsening consequences of the drought for Ethiopia, Somalia, and parts of Kenya, including a risk of another famine in Somalia, following one there a decade ago that killed hundreds of thousands of people. The United Nations warned earlier this week that parts of Somalia will be hit by famine between October and December, warning it was worse now than those of 2010 and 2011. The Horn of Africa is experiencing its worst drought in 40 years, and experts say the region is on track for a 5th consecutive failed rainy season. Several seasons of drought spanning more than 10 years has taken a toll on the date palm plantations in Kebili Oasis, Tunisia in North Africa. Dying vegetation has replaced verdant islands of produce due to soaring temperatures and lack of rainfall.
In an oasis notorious as the hottest place in Africa, Tunisian farmers say they are fighting a losing battle with drought and disease that's driving many to abandon plantations where they grow some of the world's finest dates. The date palm orchards at Kebili Oasis used to form green, fertile islands in an arid landscape, but now many of the trees are dying and dry, Bare and fruitless trunks stretch up into a clear blue sky. As a farmer and treasurer of the local water association, which helps date growers get access to irrigation from underground aquifers, Mohammed Bouaziz is starkly aware of the situation.
We haven't seen rain since 2011. Underground water is boiling hot. When the electricity is cut off, the farmers can't use the water for irrigation, and the water wheels are broken. Everything came at the same time.
Farmers are long accustomed to extreme heat. The highest temperature ever recorded in Africa, over 55 degrees Celsius, that's about 131 degrees Fahrenheit, was logged in Kebele in the 1930s. But they say the effect of climate change, lack of rainfall, together with an infestation of date mite blamed on the dry weather, are making life even tougher.
If we continue like this with drought and draining the water layer in 20 or 30 years, we will not find dates in Kebele.
Trees show signs of infestation, which bunches of dates wrapped in the webbing spun by mite as they feed.
Farmers, especially the youth who will inherit these oases and preserve them, have migrated by sea. Those who survive, survive, while those who die return in a large box.
More than a third of farmers have stopped using the irrigation his association provides because they could no longer afford to. And like many others despairing of a future in their own country, they were also ready to risk the dangerous journey across the Mediterranean to seek a new life in Europe. One of a string of oases on the edge of the Sahara Desert, Kebele, grew many of the dates that Tunisia exports to dozens of countries, mostly in Europe. But with successive dry seasons, it's unclear what its future will be.
And over in Somalia, the United Nations humanitarian chief Martin Griffiths says the reality caused by the drought in Somalia is unprecedented, warning the possible horror of famine coming to the Horn of Africa. He described the immense suffering of the displaced people that he has witnessed, adding that 3 million animals have died in the country alone or being sold because of continued drought.
So we're facing the reality of the consequence of 4 failed rainy seasons, unprecedented, by the way, even in Somalia, for God's sake, and the likelihood in October to December of a failure of a 5th, as predicted by meteorologists, including from the UN, and the likelihood of a 6th in January, March of next year. This has never happened before in Somalia. So all those pictures that we all grew up with, this is unprecedented. And it is for that reason that we've been banging the drum and rattling the trees and trying to get support internationally in terms of attention, prospects, and the possibilities and the horror of famine coming to the Horn of Africa. Hunger is a gateway to disease. So what that means is if you're going to try to save people from famine, you need to do it through bringing health, nutrition, water supply, and food inputs together in one package to people who are at risk of dying from famine and from hunger behind it. 3 million animals have died in Somalia alone, or being sold, because continued drought, continued failure of rainy seasons means that a generation's way of life is under threat. And what is so clear about people under threat and under stress, they calculate the margins more than the rest of us. So what do we deduce from that? We need to help them with alternative livelihoods.
And still ahead on the programme. Congo Bridge collapses seconds after being opened by officials. Details in a moment. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. And still on the situation in the Horn of Africa, a day after the United Nations Children's Agency warned that parts of Somalia will be hit by famine in the coming months. Hundreds of children have already died in nutrition centers across the country. A famine in 2011 in the country claimed more than 250,000 lives, most of them children. And the Horn of Africa region is on track for a 5th consecutive failed rainy season.
Hundreds of children have died in food and nutrition centers across Somalia between January and July this year, as reported by the United Nations. But it says there could be other unknown hunger casualties.
730 looks like a small number, and it is, because we don't simply know what the full picture out there is. I have met many families whose children died along the way as we were coming on trek to come and seek help in the IDP camps and so on. Somalia really is a very difficult place to have a full understanding of what is happening out there, simply because the systems for data collection do not exist. And so what we have at the moment is really going by the deaths that are recorded in the nutrition centers.
Unfortunately, with hunger comes the tendency for disease to creep in. So the centers are for children with severe acute malnutrition, as well as other complications such as measles, cholera, and malaria. And these are considered just a snapshot of the situation across the country.
Famine is on our doorsteps, and we're going to be witnessing the death of children on an unimaginable scale in the last months of 2022 if we don't act fast. 30,000 people have been arriving and moving between IDP camps each week over the past weeks, which is an increase of 135% on recent months. Over 1 million people have displaced internally this year so far. Most of them have walked for up to 10 days in search of food and water, arriving with literally nothing in a deteriorated state, with malnourished children or children who have died. Many of the mothers I have talked to had buried children in the previous days, either from contracting diarrhea or measles in the overly congested camps or along the way from malnutrition.
UNICEF says that disease outbreaks are increasing among children, with some 13,000 suspected measles cases reported in recent months, in which 8% are children under the age of 5. Funding for Somalia has increased in recent weeks, and the United Nations $1.46 billion appeal is now 67% funded. And the United Nations $1.46 billion appeal is now 67% funded. But aid officials warn that it has come very late and that more may be needed.
60 lorries carrying grain from Ukraine have arrived in Ethiopia nearly a month after they left the Black Sea port of Pivdeni. The supplies were brought by the World Food Programme to assist its relief efforts in the Horn of African nation. It's the first shipment of grain from Ukraine to Africa since the start of Russia's invasion. The WFP says that the supplies will help feed more than 1.5 million people for a month. Some 23,000 tons of Ukrainian wheat docked in neighboring Drought last week. Ethiopia, along with other countries in the region, is experiencing a prolonged drought that, as well as the continued civil war in the northern Tigray region, has left some 20 million people in need of food assistance. But renewed clashes in the country's north mean getting the food to where it's needed will be difficult, especially in the embattled Tigray region. Togo has extended a state of emergency for 6 months in its northern Savannah's border region hit by jihadist attacks. The West African country, which has recorded at least 5 attacks since November, declared a state of emergency in June, which was due to end mid this month. But on Tuesday, the Togolese National Assembly unanimously voted to extend it for 6 months until March next year. According to the Togolese Minister of Security, the extension is necessary for the proper conduct of military operations, maintaining order, and for return of peace and security in the region. And now dozens of South African students say they feel motivated after having a glimpse of life in outer space during a dialogue with the 3 Chinese astronauts currently carrying out the Shenzhou 14 mission. The Shenzhou 14 astronauts, who are on a 6-month stay at the China space station, spoke about their experience so far during the dialogue via video link with students from at least 8 African countries.
Astronauts fielding questions from young Africans during a dialogue facilitated by the Mission of Africa to the African Union, the China Manned Space Agency, and the African Union Commission.
It was just amazing to actually hear from them and to see and to learn about all their experiences in space. They said it takes around 9 hours for them to get into space, and they struggle a little bit with being away from their families for so long.
I didn't know that they eat processed foods. I thought you eat like burgers or like pizza up in space. And what I did know today is that for you to go to space, my mental capacity and physical capacity has to be like 100%.
Mesmerized by the interaction with the astronaut, another student feels more confident to realize her dreams in future.
It made me feel as though my dreams are more attainable, because those people, all of the astronauts came from, well, the ones that we saw, especially in the video, had come from very difficult situations but managed to get where they were, get to space and do incredible things.
The South African participants are attending the event at the Chinese Embassy in South Africa, located in Pretoria.
I hope one day in the future they will join our technocrats and become a technocrat themselves. China has been having this blue plan with African countries, under the umbrella, the framework of FOCAC. There are 8 projects that's going to be implemented within the next 3 years. And one of the items is on space science.
China's space program has been running for 30 years. It's the 3rd country to make it into space, and it's hoping to help Africa do the same. South African students say they hope their country's collaboration with China on space projects can help develop its own space program. The seed of possibility has been planted, and being able to engage with the astronauts has brought the space dream much closer for young Africans.
And for the first time, Egypt's Transport Authority has hired 2 women to drive the capital's metros. Before taking the helm, the women were trained for months and are excited for more females to join.
2 Egyptian women considered the first to be trained and hired as underground metro drivers, are hoping they'll pave the way for more females to join the field. Hend Mahmoud and Susan Ahmed were trained for months by RATP Development Mobility Cairo RDMC, the company operating the country's 3rd metro line, before they took the helm.
When I saw the advert for the job, I was so excited. I felt I could succeed in this position, coupled with the fact that it is the first time in Egypt. And I thought it would be great for me to be one of the first women to be in this place. The training prepared me to be responsible for the train without being afraid.
In recent months, Egypt's Transport Authority has opened new lines for the metro connecting various areas of the capital.
The biggest challenge, yet I see it as normal, is people's bewilderment. I even expected worse reactions, but to the contrary, most of the reactions were positive. A lot of people were very encouraging. A lot of people came to us after the end of our shifts to wish us good luck, and a lot of women were excited and asked us how they could apply to become metro drivers like us.
The company employs a total of 78 male and female drivers and plans on training other women in the coming months.
And this is the moment a bridge collapsed in the Democratic Republic of Congo as it was being inaugurated. In a video verified by Reuters, sharply suited dignitaries could be seen gathered on the footbridge in the capital, Kinshasa. But just as an organizer cut the ribbon, the bridge buckled. Both handrails broke off and the central section slumped into the stream a couple of meters below. Spectators shouted with apparent glee as VIPs struggled to get back onto firmer ground. Nobody was reported to have been hurt in the incident. Thank God no one was injured. And that's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Tenyola Oyetayo.